All right, let's roll. I can't get myself out of the way of the title there. Ooh. Right, evening guys. I'm going to just jump straight in because obviously I know everyone is super busy. That's kind of going to be one of the points of doing this. Hope everyone can hear me okay. What we're going to cover today is how any 40 plus businessman or any just busy guy, and if you're 40 plus, you are probably busy with a job or a business, kids, wives, and a social life. And that is typically something that holds a lot of men back. So how you guys can shed 10 to 15 kilos. You may need to lose more. I think for a lot of the guys I work with, 10 to 15 kilos makes a big difference. It tends to get them started. But of course, I've got one guy now that's lost something like 25 kilos. What we talk about in this is just going to be how you start. And really, it would be the principle of just continuing. Really bodes on you being able to be consistent. So you can supercharge your productivity, have more energy, and fit back into hopefully your favorite wardrobe, or possibly you might buy something new. The key though to all this is to do it without starving yourselves, sacrificing all the foods you like or love, and spending hours in the gym every day, or even maybe twice a day, because again, all of these things are barriers to being able to do it, or they just make it very, very challenging in terms of like maybe food restriction and hunger and all the things that most guys say when they try and lose weight, and then they wonder why they can only lose 1 or 2 kilos, maybe 5 kilos. Some of you may have lost 10 kilos. I spoke to a guy earlier who lost quite a lot of weight and has gained quite a lot of it back. So again, the key to what we're going to talk about today is how to lose it in a way that you can actually keep it off for the rest of your life, because it doesn't really matter if you can only like lose it for a holiday or in the new year, if it just comes back. Why does that not want to let me go into? There we go. Right. So just going to kind of briefly talk about what like I think the model of like a successful body transformation needs. And I say body transformation, but what we are talking about is body health, energy, confidence. Just going to kind of package it as body transformation. I know most of the guys I work with want to look better, but it isn't just about how they look. It's about health, feeling, confidence, energy, and those things. So this is kind of what we want. Why is it not just going to do that? Am I just going to click it? Right, in the middle, there's transformation. Basically, what you want is less fat, more muscle. Everyone's going to be different, but that is probably, if you're watching this training, you probably want a little bit less body fat. You may want a lot less body fat, and you probably want a little bit more muscle, or at the very least, you want to maintain muscle, which we'll come back to because that's just as important. We want energy and health. Obviously, most of the guys I'm talking to are 40, 50, 60. No point looking good if you drop dead and in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, and it does happen. And freedom and flexibility. And when I don't mean flexibility in the sense of you need to be able to do the splits, might be nice, might be a goal, but what I'm talking about here is the flexibility to be able to jump between kind of fitness person and just normal bloke that can have a beer or a date night or some, a treat, and doesn't get stuck in that kind of, they have to be one or the other. And kind of freedom in the sense of it just empowers you. You're free to just live your life. I always say that weight loss, fitness, it really shouldn't be a problem that is you're burdened with for years. It's not something you can just think about and stop. Of course, it would be lovely if we could do all these things for 6 months and then never do it again. But it shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't be going to bed every night and worrying about losing weight when there are plenty of other things that a 40 plus man has to worry about. So kind of the freedom just to live your life and just get on with it, the flexibility to kind of be fit and healthy and enjoy. I know I hate to say it's a bit cliche, but people say stuff like, life's too short. Well, yeah, we do want some like nice things. And really, to achieve that, we have to worry about nutrition, what you're eating. We have to worry about the training and the exercise, because that is going to play a part in whether you're trying to build muscle or burn fat or be fit, be mobile, be strong. You have to do the training. And then there's mindset, which is not really the sexy one, but let's be honest, if I give you a nutrition plan and a training plan to follow, if I give 1,000 men a diet plan and a training plan, exercise plan, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do it. And I've had this with clients in the past. They've come in, I've done, my program aims to give everyone the best chance they can have at being fit and healthy for the rest of their lives, but you still have to want to do it. So we'll talk a bit about mindset. Now, within those kind of 3, there is actually there are 3 more accelerators, so 9 kind of accelerators. So I'm just going to go through it. For nutrition, we need the calorie deficit. We need to understand macronutrients, food choices, fats, protein, carbs, and we need to, I call this calorie budgeting. And I think it's important for the man who has lots of traveling, a social life, maybe does corporate lunches and dinners. One of my clients messaged me the other day, and he travels a lot, roughly half of the month every month, every month he's away. This year alone, he's traveled to over 200 cities. So what we're going to talk about later, is going to be helpful for someone like him who can't live out of Tupperware pots, can't necessarily have the perfect diet. So that's calorie budgeting. When it comes to training, we've got to worry about resistance training, strength training. We have to do some cardio, and we have to have a strategy. And I feel like that covers everything here. We do need an understanding of how those things all fit together. And of course, if you change the training, you have to change the nutrition. If you change the nutrition, you have to change the training. So they obviously play off of each other, which is important. And then with mindset, we've kind of got an all or nothing mindset, expectations and beliefs, just things that allow us to commit to the process, not get impatient, stay motivated. And the one I'm going to cover, the all or nothing, is going to be one that I think a lot of successful men tend to fall into. We'll come back to that. We are going to cover three, one from each. We're going to cover calorie deficit for nutrition. We are going to cover resistance training, and we're going to cover that all or nothing mindset. But just bear in mind, there are some other things that I feel like play a part of kind of the big picture when it comes to a body transformation. Not overly technical, really easy to learn and very easy to implement, but it's just worth kind of thinking, right, if I can tick those things. And it's probably worth you at this point now kind of giving yourself like a green if you're good with it, like if you understand it and you do it. There'll be some things I talk about here where it's a green, you're like, I already do that. It's kind of maybe an amber where it's like I do it from time to time, I'm not very consistent. Or maybe a red where it's like I don't even know what the hell he's talking about, which is possible, or I never do it. And then over the course of this training we go through, you can kind of rank yourself and say, right, okay, these are the things I'm doing well at, these are the things that I kind of could be better, and these are the things that are red. And if, for example, like the three that I've chosen, calorie deficit, resistance training, all or nothing, if those are reds or ambers, well, if they're a red, you're not going to get any results. If they're an amber, then you will probably be a yo-yo dieter. And if they're green, well, you probably wouldn't be on the training. So that's kind of how I would do it from here. So let's dive in. So the first one, or the first key to losing fat, is the calorie deficit. It is just the most important thing. So we've got calorie deficit, macros, and we've got calorie budgeting. We're going to kind of zoom in on calorie deficit at this point. If you don't have a calorie deficit, you just quite simply can't lose body fat. Over the last few years, you kind of had this kind of like two camps where you get people that will say stuff like calorie deficit is all that matters. And in some respects, there have been people that kind of have proved it. There was the guy that did the potato diet for a year. One professor did a diet where he only ate Twinkies and some other American treat, and he lost weight and his blood pressure improved. So arguably, yes, maybe the calorie deficit does only work, but these guys didn't really build much muscle, didn't build any strength. And I remember the guy who did the potato diet really didn't look very good at the end. So there's one extreme, and then there's the other extreme where people will say stuff like the calorie deficit just doesn't work. It's not needed. It's just about sugar. You just need to cut out carbs. You need to eat more frequently. And these are the people that do that, or the men that do that, just don't get the results they want. So from a nutritional standpoint, if you're going to sit there and you're going to say, right, I know I need to follow some kind of structure. I think the mistake many men make is they don't have a diet structure. I don't really want to use the word diet. I just think of it as a nutritional strategy. Most of you don't have one, or at best it may just be, I'm going to cut junk out. I'm going to just eat clean. Those guys that do that are often guys that will lose weight initially, because if you have been eating poorly, you've been eating McDonald's and, snacking on foods that are kind of high in sugar, very calorie dense, and then you kind of go to eating clean. Initially, you lose weight. You don't always. I've got several case studies of guys who came to me who were eating really well. I could see them in MyFitnessPal and stuff, but they weren't tracking their calories, and therefore they weren't in a calorie deficit. So you have to have that calorie deficit to put your body into a fat burning mode. That's almost a cliche now. I remember reading that kind of thing when I was about 15, but it's true. We need the calorie deficit. It is kind of step number one. And obviously I've kind of discussed the macronutrient part of it, because if you don't get the macronutrients right, you will suffer with things like lots of hunger, hormone problems, possibly muscle loss. But obviously there's not enough time to cover this whole thing. So think of the calorie deficit as your step number one. Client comes into my program, they send me their lifestyle questionnaire, I look at their photographs, their history of their food, everything. But still, the first thing I need to determine is how much food am I going to give them? Because if I give them too much, they could gain weight. If I give them too little, they may lose weight too quickly. They may lose muscle. They may be too hungry. So it's still, even for me at this point now, after 20 years, it's the first thing I have to do from a nutritional point of view. If you don't do it, you could be the guy that thinks he's eating well, or is eating well. You know, you're eating lots of nuts and seeds and avocado and steak, lots of things that we all know are kind of healthy for us. But if we take those examples of nuts and seeds and avocados, they're very calorie dense because they're high in fat. So you could, let's say hypothetically, you needed 2,000 calories to lose weight, but you're eating 2,500. You just don't realize it because you're not tracking it. You're not in a calorie deficit. You don't lose body fat, and you are the person that's scratching your head going, I'm eating really well. I've cut out junk food. I spoke to a guy yesterday in Australia who was a great example. He's like, I've not had any bread, and I did a dry couple of months. I haven't had any alcohol for 60 days, and I haven't lost a single pound. And the issue here was he actually said, I've got this mindset of like, what's the point? And I'm having to force myself not to just say sod it and have those things in abundance. So that's the most important thing we need to have, calorie deficit. How do you create that? Google calculator. You can go on there, chuck in your weight, your height, your age, and it will calculate it for you. A word of warning though, it's the same as if anything I give my clients, it's all done on their feedback or all their information. 19 years of me doing this in the fitness industry, but still it's a start point. It's kind of like, this is where I think you need to be based on experience and science, but doesn't always pan out. I was a good example of that. Coach gave me quite high calories when I was bodybuilding, and then long story short, they had to be much lower because my metabolism adapts very quickly. So here's let's click this. Here's John. Some of you may have seen him on my other posts. 52 when he came to me. He's now actually just about to turn 60, and we gained about a stone of muscle over the years after this. But I wanted to use like the initial transformation, the first one. The picture on the left is where he got to on his own, and he hit the wall. And one of the things he wasn't doing was tracking his food, so therefore he wasn't in a calorie deficit. There are two things that can happen, really. You aren't in a calorie deficit from the beginning, or you are in a calorie deficit from the beginning, you lose 20 pounds, and then your body adapts, and over the time, the calorie deficit dwindles away and you plateau. It's kind of where John was. And he basically said to me, this is roughly where I always get stuck at. It's not overly bad, but he was like, I'm 52. I've always wanted a six pack. I never had one. I get to this point, I get a bit fed up, and I kind of gain the weight back. The picture on the right was about 6 months later. So I can't say this is going to be the same for every single man. John was somebody that, even though he was traveling a lot and doing a lot of kind of like speaking and stuff for his business, he was still very on top of what he was doing. Very clean with the diet, follows it to a T, and that's the result. But for the first time in his whole life, he had that six-pack he wanted, and you can see by his shoulders and stuff, he gained some good muscle as well. The only real difference here is I just told him how many calories to eat and how much protein, and I made some changes to his diet. I don't want everyone to think that the only thing I changed was just the diet. I made some changes to his training and some other things, but really, he came to me with that picture on the left, and I think he'd lost a couple of stone already, and the problem is calorie intake. He's plateaued, and that's really what stops a lot of men from achieving their goals. that is that's why I put it as, that's why I've talked about it on this. It's like, it's the one that everybody wants to talk about. From the training section, the key to better body shape is progressive resistance training. And I feel like a lot of men, bear in mind, like I said, I've worked in gyms, I've taught fitness classes, I've personal trained, now do this online, but I've done this for nearly 2 decades. And the amount of men that have said to me, I'm going to lose weight first, and then I'm going to tone up. Very, very, very common. I used to teach spinning classes, like boxercise circuits, basically aerobic calorie burning classes where people go to lose weight, which I used to say you shouldn't be here. So I would say to a lot of the guys, why are you doing your 10th class this week? It's just ridiculous. But the reason why they'd often go is because they saw it as a better option for their goals. And their goals being, I want to lose body fat. Now, every single, apart from one guy, I think at the moment, every guy that I work with, I work with guys that typically want to lose weight first. I've got some guys that have done really well, have lost all their body fat and now are trying to gain muscle, but 99% of the men that I speak to are sick of being flabby and they need to lose weight. That's their primary goal, which means we have to think of all the training plans. Everything has to be designed around fat loss, but that doesn't mean we don't do resistance training. 2 things really happen when you don't do resistance training. You lose muscle is the result, firstly, especially if you get the calories wrong and the protein wrong, which a lot of men do, obviously beyond the scope of this training. But if you go into a calorie deficit, so if you get point number 1 right, you get the calorie deficit, you start doing lots of aerobic training and you don't do any progressive. When I say progressive, I mean you're trying to get stronger. Don't care if you're 40, 50, 60 or 80, you should be trying to get stronger. And you see it now. One of the good things of social media, 80, 90-year-old men and women deadlifting and just like, lifting crazy weights, and it's great to see. So that's progressive resistance training. If you don't do it while you are dieting, you can lose muscle. Losing muscle will make you will give you 1 or 2 things. It will make you look skinny fat, really. The amount of guys that say to me, I lost a couple of stone. I was kind of happy, but the outcome wasn't really what I wanted. It wasn't really what I kind of visioned in my mind. I was kind of a smaller version of myself, still quite flabby. And that's because that's what's happened is as their body fat has come down, muscle has come down as well. So the body composition, the body fat percentage it's not being improved. It's not changing. It's not changing for the better. The second thing, which is a big concern, I think, and I think this is something to take note of, is that if you lose lean body mass, if you lose muscle at the end of the diet, the body kind of senses that there's been a loss of muscle mass. To a certain extent, it's important. We don't need to be bodybuilders, but there's a certain amount of muscle we need to function and stuff. So it actually increases your appetite and your hunger. So what you'll see is people that lose weight, lose muscle, they finish the diet, they're more hungry and they have a bigger appetite than somebody, if all things being equal, had not lost the muscle. And then you get to the end of your diet, chances are you've done the diet wrong. You've done something like something you've disliked. You've cut all the things out you like to eat, and you've kind of got there somehow. And then you're ravenous, so you overeat. Now, because you've lost muscle, your metabolism has also slowed down. So you've got a situation where you're burning fewer calories every day, and your hunger hormones are saying, "I need to eat," and that's where people get fat again, and they gain more fat than they started. It's known as collateral fattening. You lose 15 pounds, you gain 20. And of course, if you do that, you do that over 10, 15 years, this is where people do say, dieting, this is where people say dieting makes you fatter. It's not really true. It's really the way that people do it. So that is the disadvantage of kind of prioritizing aerobic training. Resistance training doesn't have to be done every single day. This is why the guys I work with are very busy. They have kids, they travel a lot, and for the most part, they do enjoy it. But for the most part, they don't really want to be in the gym every single day. They're not bodybuilders. They want to just, they want to do as almost the same as me now after 20 years, 25 years of doing this. I love the gym, but I don't want to be in there 6 days a week. I dropped from 6 to 4, and I'm considering doing a 3-day split so I can just have more time doing the other things that I need to do in my life. So there's no need to be in the gym every day. I think if you are somebody who wants to maintain muscle, so if you're sitting there now saying, look, I don't need to gain muscle, that can be hard to judge, but I do speak to quite a lot of guys who are, if you're kind of broader, maybe you played rugby, you're kind of thicker set, you might have a good amount of muscle underneath that when you lose the body fat, you're just happy. And how you look should really just be based on how you feel about yourself. And that's all that matters. So if that is you might say to yourself, well, I don't need to do much resistance training because I don't need to gain any muscle. I would be happy just to maintain and maybe build strength. You could quite literally do 2 sessions a week of about half an hour to an hour, probably half an hour, maybe even 20 minutes, if I'm honest. If your goal is to actually increase muscle mass, which is if you're more like myself, just genetically average, so like, I wasn't made to be like muscular, I needed to gain muscle, then I think 3 to 4 sessions per week is plenty. It doesn't have to be in a gym. It doesn't have to be 2 hours long. I think anywhere from half an hour to an hour, if we allow for kind of warm up and stretching and stuff, is plenty. Like I said, could be done at home. Most of my guys buy some resistance bands that they take to hotels with them. They take on holiday if they want to. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I make them exercise on holiday, but they have kind of programs for that. So it doesn't have to be overly time consuming. You don't have to do 20 exercises, 10 sets. You don't have to be doing loads of training. That's what brings the time down. So you don't have to do too many days, and the time you do it doesn't have to be overly long, because let's just take a muscle group like the chest. You're 40 years old, 50 years old, maybe you've never trained, or maybe you've not trained for 5-10 years, or maybe you have been training and not getting results. You're not going to have to do a lot of chest work to gain muscle. You don't need to be doing I've made this mistake. I've done 2-hour chest sessions and it's ludicrous. When I look back, I think it was ridiculous. It doesn't need to be every day, 3 to 4 times, 30 minutes to an hour, more than enough for the majority of men. And the key here is progressively getting stronger. And one final point I want to kind of touch upon before I move on to the last one is, do not turn your strength training into a cardio session. So many men are guilty of this. They want to go into the gym, lift weights, and they want to sweat. All that sweating does is it feels good. It doesn't do anything for your weight loss. And they want to get their heart rate up to burn calories. I get it. It makes sense. Your goal is, you're thinking to yourself, I want to burn fat. That's what the gym is for, but it's not. The cardio and the diet, the calorie deficit that you create from controlling calories and doing some cardio or walking or being active in general, think of that as your key to fat loss. So when you go into the gym to lift weights, you aren't there to burn calories. This is why, like, one of the new guys came into my program a couple of days ago and did his first training session yesterday, and he said, like, it feels like a really long time to rest 3 minutes between the set. Did you get that wrong? And I was like, no, that's how long you should rest, because having a longer rest will allow you to basically allow you to train the muscle more effectively, and you will get more from it. If you start to shorten the rest down, you turn it into circuit training. So let's use an example. You do a bench press and then you only rest 20 seconds and you do it again. You have to do more sets. You have to be in the gym for longer. You don't get as much muscle gain and you don't really burn that many calories. So use the gym as a place where you, from a resistance training point of view, because that's what we're covering, a place where you focus on strength and recovery and progression. Be careful. I'm not saying you are all going to need to try and break world records, but if you are leg pressing 50 kilos today and I bump into you in 6 months' time and it isn't 60, 70, 100 kilos, then you haven't gained muscle. So just keep that in mind. The last one, not the last one, not the case study first. This is a pretty decent case study, actually, because this is a guy who had lost weight on his own. It's a bit of a theme, really, actually. So the picture on the left is basically where he got to on his own. I can't remember exactly. I remember he wrote a review for my Trustpilot, and I think he got stuck for 2 years. He got to that picture on the left was where he was at for about 2 years, which I'm guessing, he was, I guess, content for a while. And that was kind of achieved by doing mostly running. But his goal was to be leaner and have more definition. And if you look, you can see there's bigger shoulders. Obviously, he's leaner. Again, similar to John, I don't want to make out that this was just a change in going from running to weight training. He had to lose body fat as well. So the calorie deficit and the nutrition plays a part. But he was a good example of someone who is running too much and then kind of wondering why he isn't getting a kind of more athletic look. And this is decent, he's 48. He went on to do, I remember he went off on his own for another year or two, carried on training, and then he did a photo shoot for his 50th. This is just a normal dude. Like, he's just, he's got a job and kids and a wife. But you can see the difference in his body shape, I think, is the key here. I think even if none of you, which is probably everyone watching this, want to actually, you don't want to be bodybuilders, you don't want to be on the front cover of magazines. Some of you might not want to build muscle, but most of you probably want to have a bit better shape. There's very few people that come to me that don't want to gain a little bit of muscle. And he's a good example of someone that's done it. He's not bulky. He didn't have to go into the gym. If I remember rightly, he did 3 full body sessions a week, and he continued the running because it was helping with the cardio, his fitness. He enjoyed it, and we still needed to utilize the aerobic training for the calorie deficit because that's how he got to where he is. But notice the change in shape from bringing in some progressive resistance training. He did that at the gym. I think, like I said, 3 times a week. And I think probably half an hour to an hour, because it's, like I said, that is not an extreme goal. Like, he hasn't tried to he hasn't come to me and said, Phil, I want to gain. And I get this quite a lot with guys who come to me and say, Phil, I want to lose weight and I want to gain 2 stone of muscle. And I'm like, honestly, it's like, that's the kind of thing that I try to do. And I've been doing it for 20 years and it hasn't quite happened yet. So it's just not an extreme goal, but that's hopefully made you realize the importance of resistance training, even if your goal is weight loss, fat loss. The final one, the not so sexy one. Anything, honestly, I struggle to talk about mindset and stuff because it is a bit blah, but it's become a bit woo on the internet. I'm going to see my pink cup now. My manly pink cup. But the key to permanent results is to ditch the all or nothing attitude. I don't know if this is men in general or if it's the men I work with, who are typically business owners, entrepreneurs. And so they're quite all or nothing in the sense of they go all in. And that's typically why they've ended up kind of overweight, is they'll go all in on other areas of their life, which is fair enough. They're trying to be a great dad, they're trying to provide, they're career driven, or they're trying to grow a business, they're trying to pay the bills. So everything goes in all or nothing. And then they gain weight. Here's the problem with an all or nothing approach to weight loss. And when I say all or nothing, I kind of look at it as an extreme. You've either got couch potato, for lack of a better term, or you've got, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got Olympic athlete, bodybuilder, you've got professional. And what I find guys do is they go from kind of couch potato, something happens to make them want to lose weight. It's a comment, or they see a photograph, or they try and put on a suit and they think, or they look in the mirror. One day they go, I look like shit. I need to fix this. Or the doctor says, you're going to be diabetic soon. And they immediately go to the other end of the spectrum. I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week. I'm going to cut out all carbs. I'm going to lower my calories. I'm not going to have any junk food. I'm not going to drink. And that's all well and good if you have the heart and the willpower to do it. As somebody that has done it for 6 months for a bodybuilding competition, it's horrible. And that was even with me having my weekly refeed where I was allowed to eat junk food every week. Even though I had Sunday off to eat what I wanted pretty much, and I literally mean anything I wanted, the rest of the week was grueling. I think it was horrible. So unless you've got the willpower to do that, it's not going to happen. And then you've got this other situation where chances are you have date nights, a social life, work commitments, business meeting, traveling. If I go back to my client Paul, who has been to over 200 cities this year, what's that, 20, 25 a month? He sends me the Google Analytics, and it's just the whole map of Europe is where he's been. How is he supposed to follow something that's all or nothing? How is he supposed to be that extreme? And that's what he was doing. He was kind of being extreme at home because he could. Bear in mind, he's only at home 1 to maybe 2 weeks a month. But then he was going to Europe, and then he was just drinking and just falling off the wagon because he was flipping between the all or nothing. It doesn't work. You know, this is why people say things that are cliche, like, you know, it's all about balance, it's all about moderation, and it is. What you want is to be able to switch on fit person and then switch it off and then go to normal person. You don't want to be the guy that can't have a beer with his friends. You don't want to be always kind of, it's a bit of a joke, but you don't want to be because I heard someone did it once, or a guy that did it, but you don't want to be the guy that takes protein shakes to the cinema. I don't even do that crazy stuff. You need to ditch the all or nothing approach. The same goes with training. Doing too much training, going twice a day, 6 days a week, attending several fitness classes like hours in a row, it's not sustainable. And most men will do it in the short term while they can manage it, maybe while they've got the time to do it. A great example of that was COVID, when people were in lockdown. People all of a sudden had nothing better to do but walk. Some people just ate and drink. But the guys that I spoke to that lost weight said, I know, I had loads of time. I didn't have to work. Or I was just working from home. I walked more. I did loads of exercise. I ate really well. And then as soon as they went back to the office, the old habits came back, and they're like, okay, now I'm busy again. Now I've got kids at school again. So what we need to do is find somewhere in the middle. The balance is in the middle there with that mentality. The key to that does come back round to what I've spoken about already with the calorie deficit, knowing that you can eat food you like and you can get away with it if you're in a calorie deficit. There's also the understanding that hopefully you've listened in section 2 when we talked about the resistance training, where that doesn't have to be every single day and it doesn't have to be for hours. Or hopefully that you're thinking to yourself, right, okay, well, it might actually hinder you to go to the gym every single day and do 2 hours. You probably would get poorer results because you will affect your recovery. So therefore, hopefully in your mind, you're starting to say, okay, it doesn't make sense to have an all or nothing approach to this. It's the one that everyone gets wrong. Here's Den, who, I need to update this photograph because I think we've got a better one. But anyway, he's lost about 5 stone, just over 5 stone now. And he did a testimonial for me. I posted it maybe a week or 2 ago. One of the things he said, and this came from really a lack of knowledge, maybe more than actually, but one of the things he said he did wrong was, from a dietary point of view, just cut the calories too low, made it too strict. Then he would get hungry, or he would start to miss the foods that he loved, or he would get, he'd be invited out for some lunch or a dinner or a birthday. And if you do that, you are then torn between, do I sit here and look weird and deprive myself to achieve my goals, or do I say sod it and have a beer or two and join in? And most men don't regulate that very well. So it's kind of like, do I not have anything, or do I just eat everything? There's no middle ground. So that's kind of the thing he did. He would just make the diet too extreme. And the training side of things, he was a little bit more balanced with. But from a dietary point of view, he just said, I just chose to eat too little, make it too strict. I'd get hungry, get sick of it, and then I gain the weight back. And I guess if I speak to 1,000 men who can't lose weight, I would be very, very willing to bet that a high percentage of men have dealt with that. So kind of as a recap, see if I can go back into here and bring them back up. The sexy ones basically we covered today. Calorie deficit, step 1 in creating a diet. You have to be in a calorie deficit. There are ways to make that easier by having more protein and stuff, but you have to have the calorie deficit so that you can essentially put yourself in a fat burning mode. You have to do the resistance training. I know it kind of maybe feels counterintuitive because your goal is to lose body fat. And sometimes a lot of you guys don't have a lot of time. I spoke to a guy earlier who's training, I think 4 days a week, and he's doing about an hour, and he's doing mostly cardio. And so what we're going to do is, there are ways where we can actually, you know, if you've got an hour, and like I said, you're not overly kind of ambitious about being a bodybuilder, there's no reason why you can't get cardio and resistance training done in an hour. There are ways to do that. There are plenty of strategies to make training more time efficient. So that's important. If you don't do the resistance training, you could lose muscle, not look as good, and you have that whole collateral fattening issue where you get to the end of the diet, your body senses that you've lost muscle, it needs it back, it wants you to eat. You're also probably craving foods that you've missed anyway, because the end of a diet is often like that unless you've done it right. And you get a situation where you don't look as good, metabolism has dropped, hunger is up, appetite is up, you overeat, and then, well, if you've done it, you know how quickly body fat can come back. And then in terms of the mindset, we have to adjust our beliefs. I think adjusting expectations is a huge one. I probably have to talk to clients every single day about expectations, because it's never fast enough. And it's quite interesting. Somebody could come to me and say, I've been struggling to lose weight for 10 years, and then they drop a couple of pounds a week for 6 months, and it's not quick enough. But that's just, you know, we're human. That's what we want. We always want it quicker. But the main one there is the all or nothing approach. The idea that you don't have to be all in. It's never going to be perfect. There are going to be times where you, for lack of a better term, probably cock it up a little bit, or you have to have. I had a client just came back to me, lost some weight, gained some muscle, and he came back to me, and he's been with me about 3 weeks, getting into the swing of things, and he had a stag do. That's a tough one. Like, it's not like when you get to our age, there's not many stag do's going on. So I would never say, just, you know, unless you've got a photo shoot or a sporting event, or you're a professional, he basically just had to accept that on that stag do, he's going to drink a little bit more, and, you know, he's going to lose a few days again. But that's all part of not being all or nothing. It's about understanding there's a time and a place to be fit. There's a time and a place to kind of relax, and there's the ability to not let a couple of bad days turn into a couple of bad months or a couple of bad years. So there's the overview of those 3 things. Like I said, there are kind of 9. Hopefully that helps. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them now. Probably stop the share at this point, and I will probably stop recording as well, to be honest.